David Marshall drove through the dark city streets with a tight knot in his chest. The night air was cool against his face, but he barely felt it. His mind raced back to the call he had received just 30 minutes before. A single sentence from the emergency room nurse had shattered everything. "Mr. Marshall, your daughter's car has crashed. We need you here now." His heart pounded as if it would burst out of his ribs. He glanced at the clock on his dashboard. It read 11:42 p.m. He had left the office at 10. Tonight he had planned to finish a report and send it by midnight. Instead, he was racing toward the hospital, wondering if he would ever see Emily walk again. The hospital loomed ahead, its glass doors gleaming under the harsh lights. David parked and jumped out of the car. He hurried through the sliding doors. Without stopping to say hello, inside, the air smelled of antiseptic and quiet fear. The halls were almost empty now, but the sound of distant monitors and hushed voices made each step feel heavy. At the reception desk, a tired nurse pointed him to the ICU. "Room 5A," she said softly. Her eyes were kind but sad. David nodded, and followed the narrow corridor lined with rows of doors. When he reached 5A, he pushed the door open and froze. His daughter lay on a hospital bed under white sheets. Tubes ran from her arms and chest to machines that beeped in steady rhythms. Her dark hair was spread over the pillow, damp with sweat. Her face looked peaceful, but her body was still. A sharp ache tore at David's heart. He rushed to her side and gently took her hand. It felt cold and fragile, like a broken bird wing. A doctor stood nearby, reading a chart. She looked up and gave him a small, professional nod. "Mr. Marshall, I'm Dr. Reyes," she said. "Your daughter has a spinal injury. It's serious. We had to operate to stabilize her back. Right now she's awake, but she cannot move her legs." David's breath caught in his throat. He closed his eyes and let the words wash over him. His little girl Mela could not move her legs. Emily, who had danced in recitals since she was 3, who had run across fields with her. Friends, who had laughed and spun like a bird free in the sky. He opened his eyes and looked at her once more. Her eyes fluttered open. She blinked at him, then at the machines, then at the doctor. A single tear slid down her cheek. David squeezed her hand. He tried to speak, but his voice failed him. Dr. Reyes stepped closer. "She may never walk again," the doctor said gently. "Right now, it is too soon to know the full extent of her injury. The spine can sometimes heal over time, but we have to be realistic. There is a chance she could remain paralyzed below the waist." David felt as if the walls were closing in. He took a shaky breath. "What can we do?" he asked. "We will begin physical therapy as soon as she is stable," Dr. Reyes said. "It will be hard work. She may feel frustrated. We will support her, but we need her strength and her will." She paused. "We will do everything we can." David nodded, though he felt numb. He sat beside Emily, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. She sighed and closed her eyes again. The beeping of the machines seemed louder now, sound echoing in the hollow space his heart had become. In the days that followed, David barely slept. He stayed at the hospital, moving from Emily's room to his own small office at the end of the hall. He answered emails, signed papers, and approved deals, all while staring at Emily's empty bed from time to time. His assistants called, but he left their messages unanswered. Work was the only thing that kept him from falling apart completely. If he could keep his mind busy, he could delay the pain for a little longer. Emily underwent surgery on her spine. She woke up in a new gown, her legs wrapped in bandages and braces. She tried to lift her foot, and nothing happened. She tried again and again, but her foot lay still. That night, she cried herself to sleep. David sat by her bedside, holding her hand, whispering promises he did not know if he could keep. He told her he loved her more than anything. He told her she was stronger than she thought. He told her she would walk again. When she finally drifted off, he pressed his forehead against hers and wished he could heal her pain. A week later, the hospital arranged for Emily's first physical therapy session. The room was bright, with large windows and bars arranged like a hallway. A physical therapist named Sarah greeted them. She was young and energetic, and she offered a gentle smile. Emily tried to stand with the help of parallel bars, but her legs buckled under her weight. Sarah supported her arms and encouraged her softly. Emily gritted her teeth and pushed herself up, but her legs gave way, and she collapsed back onto the padded floor. "I'm sorry," Emily whispered, tears blurring her vision. "I can't do it." Sarah knelt beside her and touched her arm. "It's okay," she said. "You're hurt right now. Your body needs time. We will start with small steps. You will get there." David watched from the corner, his throat tight. He wanted to scream at the world for being so cruel. He wanted to hide Emily away until she felt better. He wanted to cry, but he held back. He nodded to Sarah's words and sent Emily a brave smile. Over the next few days, Emily continued her therapy. She learned to move her toes, then flex her ankles. She practiced standing while holding onto bars. Each tiny movement felt like a triumph. But each time she tried to take a step, her legs betrayed her. She would feel a spark of hope, only to have it snuffed out. The cycle of hope and disappointment wore her down. David spent long hours at his desk. He'd missed home-cooked meals and collars of freshly pressed shirts. He skipped lunches. He even missed his own pillow. Checked on Emily whenever he could, watching her struggle. He tried to hide his fear. He tried to hide his tears. But he could not hide the way his shoulders slumped when he saw her pain. At night he would lie awake in the small visitor room, staring at the clock. Sometimes he would replay the accident in his mind. Emily had been walking home from a dance rehearsal. He had offered to drive her, but she had refused. She said she wanted to prove she could take care of herself. She waved and jogged down the street. He watched her go, so sure she would be safe. Then the call came. He blamed himself. If he had driven her, maybe the crash would not have happened. Maybe she would have twisted her ankle instead of her spine. But he knew it was useless. The past could not be changed. All he could do was be there for her now. One afternoon, David noticed Emily staring out the window. The sun shone bright, and children played in the yard below. Emily's eyes followed them. She closed her eyes and pressed her hands against her chest. David sat down beside her. "Do you miss dancing?" I asked gently. Emily nodded. "I miss it so much," she said. Her voice was soft, but it carried a weight. "I miss the music. Miss the feeling of moving with the rhythm. I miss the freedom." David squeezed her hand. "I know," he said, "but you will dance again. It may take time, but you will." Emily looked at him doubtfully. "What if I never do?" she asked. He took a deep breath. "Then we will find another way to bring music into your life, but we will not give up on dancing." She leaned her head against his shoulder. He wrapped his arm around her. He sat in silence, watching the play of light on her skin. For a moment, the hospital faded away, and all that mattered was their bond. As the days turned into weeks, Emily's body began to respond to therapy in small ways. She could wiggle her toes more easily. She could bear some weight on her legs. The machine still beeped, but the sounds no longer felt like a threat. They felt like steps toward healing. David found himself returning to the therapy room more often. He watched Emily's sessions and offered quiet encouragement. He even joined her for a few exercises, helping her to stretch her legs and move her feet. Emily would look at him and smile. Each smile was a reminder of why he fought so hard to stay strong. But no matter how hard they tried, Emily still could not make a single step on her own. Each attempt left her breathless, frustrated, and in tears. David would brush her hair away from her face and promise her tomorrow would be better. He believed it with every fiber of his being, even as he felt the weight of doubt pressing on his chest. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the hospital lights glowed softly, David stood at Emily's bedside. She lay quiet, her eyes following the last streaks of color in the sky. He reached out and held her hand. "This is only the beginning," he whispered. "We will find a way." Emily squeezed his hand back. She did not say a word, but her grip was firm. In that silent exchange, a spark of hope ignited between them. It was fragile, but it was real. It was enough to keep them moving forward, one day at a time. Marcus Hayes arrived at the therapy room just as the morning sun touched the window panes. carried a small bag with therapy tools, soft bands, a massage ball, and a notebook. Marcus had been a patient here years ago. He knew what it felt like. To lie in a hospital bed, hoping to move a toe. He stood tall and calm, ready to help others find their strength. When he opened the door, he saw Emily sitting in her wheelchair near the parallel bars. Her eyes were fixed on the floor, her shoulders tight. Marcus offered a gentle smile and spoke in a warm, even tone. "Good morning, Emily. Ready to try again today?" Emily lifted her head slowly and nodded. His voice felt steady, like a promise she might dare to believe. Marcus wheeled Emily over to an adjustable bench by the bars. He asked her to place her hands on the rails and support herself. Emily hesitated. The rails looked like two long arms. Waiting to hold her weight, she gripped them tightly, her knuckles white. Marcus bent down to be at her eye level. "Just lean on me," he said softly. "I've been in those bars too." He straightened and offered his own hands. Emily looked up, uncertainty in her gaze. Slowly, she placed her arms around his forearms. Marcus lifted her gently until her feet dangled above the floor. Emily's breaths came quick. Her legs trembled. Marcus held her steady and said, "You're safe here. We'll go as slow as you need." She blinked back tears but managed a small, tight-lipped smile. As Emily worked through gentle leg lifts, Marcus told her a bit about his own journey. He spoke of a day when he, too, couldn't feel below his knees after an accident at a construction site. He had fallen, hit his back, and watched with fear as the doctors shook their heads. His words were simple but full of truth. "I thought I would never walk again," he said. "I hated every minute of not moving." He paused and looked into Emily's eyes. "But then I learned about small wins. A shift in your foot, a spark in a muscle. Those began to build a path back." Emily listened, her focus shifting from the fear in her body to the hope in his story. She felt a tiny spark inside her, too. They spent the next half hour practicing ankle circles, toe taps, and gentle knee bends. Marcus used the soft bands to help Emily feel resistance. He was careful, and his voice guided her. He counted slowly. 1, 2, 3. Feel your foot flex. When Emily's band slipped, she wanted to give up. Her legs shook, and her chest rose with a sob. Marcus steadied her with a hand on her back and a word of praise. "That was good work," he said. "Your muscles are waking up. Each time they tire, they learn." Emily took a shaky breath and nodded. She raised her foot again, and this time it stayed steady for a second longer. After the exercises, Marcus rolled out a small massage ball. He showed Emily how to place it under her calf and press down to ease tight muscles. As she rolled the ball, he asked about her life before the crash. Emily closed her eyes and spoke of dance rehearsals, of the click of her ballet shoes on the wooden floor, of the cheering crowd at her last recital. Her voice grew soft and full of longing. Marcus listened, nodding, and then encouraged her to feel those memories as strength. "That drive inside you," he said, "it still lives. We can use it here." Emily's lips curved into a real smile. The ball under her leg felt warm, like a gentle hug. By the end of the session, Emily had managed to bear some weight on her feet with Marcus's help. They stood side by side, Emily holding the bars, Marcus supporting her under the arms. Looked at the floor between her feet, then up at Marcus's face. He said, "You did that. You held yourself up." She closed her eyes and let the words sink in. Her legs had felt strong, if only for a moment. When Marcus helped her back into her wheelchair, she turned to him and whispered, "Thank you." He nodded and replied, "I'm proud of you. See you tomorrow?" Meanwhile, David watched from the glass panel outside the room. He had learned to pause between meetings to catch a glimpse of Emily's progress. That day, he saw her supported by Marcus, her face showing both fear and triumph. He felt a mix of relief and curiosity. He wanted to know more about this man who was giving his daughter hope. After the session ended, David entered the room hesitantly. "Marcus," he said, "thank you for being here." Marcus turned and offered a respectful nod. "Mr. Marshall, it's an honor. Emily is doing great work." David looked at Emily, who sat quietly in her wheelchair, her hands folded. He realized that her fight had become a shared journey. He felt gratitude he could not easily say. Over the next week, Emily and Marcus settled into a routine. Each morning, he greeted her with the same calm smile. He introduced new exercises, practicing weight shifts while standing, using a stand-to-sit exercise, and even working on a small step stool. Each activity challenged Emily, but Marcus's encouragement made her try. When she felt pain or frustration, he would remind her, "It's okay to feel that. Pain means something is changing." He also taught her breathing techniques to help her stay calm. Emily found that when she focused on her breath, the fear in her legs lessened. She could push a little further. One afternoon, Marcus invited David to join the session. David stood at the back of the bright room, watching as Marcus guided Emily through step-down exercises on the stool. Marcus handed David a soft band and showed him how to support Emily's knee. David knelt beside them, his heart in his throat. He felt nervous, unsure of where to place his hands. Marcus guided him with gentle words. "Right here. Support her. Leg, just enough so she knows you're there." Emily looked at her father's face as she lowered her foot. She nodded and said, "It's okay, Daddy." David felt tears sting his eyes. He gripped the band loosely, supporting Emily more with his heart than his hands. After that session, a new bond formed between the three of them. David saw that Marcus was not just a therapist, but a guide who believed in Emily's strength. Emily trusted Marcus, even on days her body felt like a trap. And Marcus, in turn, felt honored to witness her courage. Each evening, David would call Marcus to ask how Emily had done that day. Marcus would reply with honest details. "She did 4 toe taps today. That's progress." Those simple messages gave David hope as he spent long nights in his office. At the hospital, Emily began to look forward to the sessions. She started wearing bright shirts instead of muted tones, hoping to lift her own mood. She shared small jokes with Marcus, teasing him about how he sounded like a coach at a sports game. He laughed and reminded her that she was the star player. One morning, she brought a photo from home. Her dancing shoes lined up neatly by the door. She handed it to Marcus and said, "Remember these?" Marcus looked at the picture and smiled softly. "I do. And someday, you'll wear those again." Emily felt a warm rush of determination. She tucked the photo into her notebook, a new talisman for her journey. As days passed, the shift in Emily's spirit became clear. In earlier weeks, she had stared at the floor, heavy with doubt. Now, she met Marcus's gaze with resolve. She practiced exercises on her own for short times between sessions. When she felt her legs tremble, she recalled Marcus's words, "Small wins build big victories." And she counted each win, a wiggle of her toes, a steadier stand, a longer hold on the bars. At the end of the second week, Emily managed to stand with minimal support for a full minute. Marcus timed her with his watch, then cheered, 60 seconds. Incredible. Emily smiled broadly, astonished by her own success. David, watching from the corner, clapped softly. He felt a swell of pride and relief. The journey was far from over, but now they all believed in the power of hope and hard work. Together they had found an unlikely rhythm, a daughter, her father, and a healer named Marcus, moving one small step at a time toward a future no one would ever forget. Marcus arrived a few minutes early that morning, carrying his bag of bands and a small wooden stool. The sunlight streamed through the large windows, painting the floor in gold. Emily sat in her wheelchair by the parallel bars, her face calm, but her eyes bright with determination. David stood a few steps behind her, watching. Marcus set the stool down gently and smiled. "Good morning," he said. "Today we try something new." Emily nodded, her hands gripping the wheels of her chair. Marcus helped Emily slide from the wheelchair onto the stool. Her legs felt heavy as she leaned forward, but she balanced her weight carefully. He guided her hands to the bars and said, "Push up slowly, and I'll be right here." Emily took a deep breath. She pressed against the stool, locked her arms on the bars, and lifted her body. Her legs tingled as they left the seat. Marcus stood close, ready to support her if she wavered. For a moment, she hung there, toes barely touching the ground. Then she lowered herself gently back onto the stool. "That was very good," Marcus said. "Your muscles remember more than you think." Emily let out a breath she hadn't realized. She was holding. David stepped forward and placed a hand on her shoulder. "I'm proud of you," he said. Emily looked at him, a small smile on her lips. She felt a warmth spread through her chest. She had done it with Marcus's help and her father's faith. Over the next hour, Marcus introduced more exercises. They practiced shifting weight from one foot to the other while standing, using small steps along the bars and lifting each knee high. Emily's legs shook and sweat beaded on her forehead, but she kept trying. Each time she faltered, Marcus offered a gentle word or a firm hand. "That wobble is proof you're working hard," he said. "It means your muscles are waking up." Around midweek, Emily faced her first real setback. She had been practicing alone in her room, using the walker Marcus had lent her. She managed. A few steps down the hallway, then her left leg bent sharply. The walker tipped, and she stumbled. Panicked, she grabbed the rails along the wall, her heart thudding. She sank to the floor, tears blurring her vision. Pain shot through her thigh. She lay there, afraid she had done permanent damage. She pressed the call button, and a nurse helped her back to her bed. When David arrived later that day, Marcus met him in the corridor. Marcus's face was solemn. "Emily's muscle spasm was stronger than we expected," he explained. "Her body is still healing. We need to adjust our plan." David nodded, worry etching his features. "Will she be okay?" he asked. Marcus placed a hand on David's arm. "Yes, she'll recover. But we need to be patient and gentle." David let out a breath. He trusted Marcus's judgment more than anyone else's. That evening, Emily lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The room was quiet, except for the steady hum of the machines. She felt angry and discouraged. She had wanted to prove she could do it, and now she had set herself back. David sat beside her and held her hand. "I heard about the spasm," he said softly. Emily sniffed and shook her head. "I feel useless," she whispered. "Maybe I'm not meant to walk again." David squeezed her hand. "I know it hurts," he said, "but this is not failure. It's part of the journey. You have faced worse and come back stronger." Emily turned to look at him. His eyes glistened. "I believe in you," he said, "no matter what." Emily let a single tear fall. She leaned into him, finding comfort in his presence. The next morning, Marcus arrived with a new approach. He set up a padded mat on the floor near the bars. "Today, no standing," he said. "We start with gentle stretches and strengthening on the mat." Emily nodded hesitantly. She joined him on the mat, her legs extended before her. Marcus guided her through slow leg lifts, ankle stretches, and gentle massage of the spasm area. He showed her how to breathe deeply, to release tension. As they worked, Emily felt the tightness ease. Her leg no longer throbbed with fear but loosened like a spring waking from sleep. After the mat work, Marcus invited David to join them. David sat on a low stool and watched as Marcus taught Emily how to move from the mat to her wheelchair using her arms. The exercise built the muscles in her shoulders and back that would one day help her stand longer. David tried the movement himself, demonstrating for Emily. She laughed at how clumsy her father looked, and the room filled with warmth. The first time since the crash, laughter replaced fear. With each passing day, Emily's confidence returned. She began to look forward to her sessions, greeting Marcus by name and teasing him about his old client stories. Marcus would chuckle and say, "You're my hardest working student." Emily would grin, feeling proud. One evening, David and Marcus stayed late after Emily's session to discuss her progress. The empty therapy room felt calm under the dimmed lights. David leaned against the wall, arms folded. "Marcus, I can't." "Thank you enough," he said. "You've given my daughter more than hope. You've given her belief in herself." Marcus smiled humbly. "Emily gives me more," he said. "Her strength inspires me every day." David nodded. "I'd like to do something to show our appreciation," he said. "Is there anything I can do?" Marcus paused. "Just keep supporting her," he said. "That's enough." Meanwhile, Emily practiced on her own, each afternoon. She pushed herself to walk a few steps with the walker, careful not to overdo it. When her legs trembled, she closed her eyes and imagined herself dancing again. She thought of the stage lights, the music, and the applause. She pictured herself spinning freely across the floor. That vision gave her strength to take another step. One morning, Emily surprised them both. She asked Marcus if she could try walking along the bars with only one hand on his arm instead of both. Marcus looked at her, surprised. "Are you ready?" he asked. Emily nodded firmly. She placed one hand on the bar and reached for Marcus's arm with her free hand. Together, they lifted her body. She took a slow step, then another. Her legs shook, but she kept her gaze forward. When she reached the end of the bars, Marcus let go. For a split second, she stood on her own, her balance wobbly, but she held herself upright. Then she rested her hand on the bar and exhaled in triumph. From behind the glass, David saw the moment. He broke into a broad smile and clapped softly. Tears filled his eyes. Marcus turned Emily to face the window. "You did that," he whispered. Emily's cheeks flushed with pride. "At!" She looked at Marcus, then at her father. "I can do more," she said, her voice steady. "At!" Marcus nodded. "I know you can." That afternoon, David brought Emily a gift, a music player loaded with her favorite dance songs. He handed her a set of headphones and said, "I thought this might help." Emily's eyes lit up. She plugged them in and pressed play. The soft melody of her favorite piece drifted through the speakers. Emily closed her eyes and let the music wash over her. She tapped her foot with the beat, feeling the rhythm in her heart. Marcus and David watched quietly, giving her space to enjoy the moment. Over the weekend, Emily practiced steps with the walker, matching her movements to the music. She learned to lift her knees in time, to shift weight in rhythm, to find the joy in movement. David played the music in the hospital corridor, and passers-by paused to watch her dance her own steps. Nurses and aides cheered her on. She felt like a star, shining even in a hospital gown. On Monday, Marcus introduced her to the standing frame, a device that would hold her upright for longer periods. He fitted her into the frame and adjusted the straps. Emily felt supported, her body upright as a statue. She took deep breaths and swayed lightly to the music. David recorded a short video on his phone, capturing her smile.
Dr. Marcus?
"The sight. You are making more miracles than you know," he said. Late that day, as they wrapped up the session, Emily stood tall in the frame. She looked at Marcus and said, "Thank you for believing in me." Marcus's eyes softened. "Only saw what was always there," he said. Emily turned to her father, still holding the phone. David lowered it and helped unstrap her. He knelt and hugged her gently. "You're doing so well," he said into her ear. Emily leaned her head on his shoulder. She felt strong, hopeful, and loved. That night, David sent a note of thanks to the therapy department, praising Marcus's work. He closed his laptop and went to Emily's room. She lay under the soft blanket, headphones on, eyes closed. He sat beside her bed, touched her hand, and whispered, "Tomorrow, we walk even farther." Emily smiled in her sleep, as if she already knew. And with each small victory, the path to her first steps grew clearer, guided by kindness, faith, and the steady hands of a man who once had walked a similar road. Marcus pushed open the therapy room door that afternoon and saw Emily standing between the parallel bars. The late sun cast a warm glow across the floor. Her cheeks were flushed, and her chest rose with each breath. She wore her favorite blue shirt, the one with the small yellow sun on the pocket. Marcus felt a rush of pride. Today would be the day they tried her first real steps. David stood behind Emily, his hands tucked into his pockets. He watched intently, his eyes shining with hope and nerves. He had rearranged his schedule so he could be here. When Marcus saw him, he nodded once. David offered a small smile, though his shoulders trembled with tension. Marcus stepped forward and placed his hand gently under Emily's right arm. He adjusted his grip so she could feel the warmth and firmness of his support. He did the same under her left arm, and then Emily let go of the bars. Her legs wobbled like young saplings in a breeze, but Marcus held her steady, her toes curled against the polished floor. "Are you ready?" Marcus asked in his calm voice. He waited until Emily looked at him and nodded. She tightened her grip on his arms, her palms pressing into his skin. Marcus drew in a slow breath and said, "We'll go together, one step at a time." David stepped closer and placed a hand under Emily's back, ready to help if she lost her balance. The three of them formed a small triangle of trust. "Dah!" Gave Emily an encouraging look. "I'm with you," he said. "Let me help her," he added softly so David could hear. David smiled and edged closer. Emily swallowed and nodded again. She shifted her weight to her right leg, and Marcus felt the slight pressure as her foot pressed down. Then she lifted her left foot. The muscles in her thigh quivered, but she raised it high enough to hover over the floor. Marcus felt his heart beat faster. Emily took a deep breath and placed her left foot down an inch ahead of her right. She paused, her eyes wide, as if she could not believe what had just happened. Marcus held her arms firmly, giving her all the support she needed. David watched, his mouth open in wonder. Emily's legs trembled, but she did not fall. She looked down at her feet and then back at Marcus. He nodded and said, "Good job. Now let's try another." Emily lifted her right foot this time. Felt heavier than before, but she kept her gaze on Marcus's face. David's hand pressed gently against her back as she reached forward. With Marcus's steady arms holding her, she placed her right foot down another inch ahead. That second step felt like a mountain climbed. 2 steps, Marcus exclaimed quietly, so as not to startle her. Emily let out a small laugh, mixed with relief and surprise. Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked to keep them back. David's face softened and he wiped at the corner of his eye. He stepped to the side, giving her more room. "So proud of you," he whispered. Emily looked at him, her lips curving into a genuine smile. She straightened her back, and for a moment, she stood taller than she had in months. The sunbeams shone on her hair, turning it golden around her face. Marcus suggested they try a third step. Emily nodded, though her legs shook hard. She gripped Marcus's arms tighter and shifted her weight. Her left leg lifted, and she placed it down further ahead than before. That third step felt more confident. Each movement grew steadier. David reached forward and took Marcus's place under Emily's left arm. Marcus moved to her side, ready to catch her if she slipped. Emily walked 3 steps, supported equally by her father and Marcus. She smiled broadly, the corners of her eyes crinkling with happiness. They stopped after those 3 steps. No? Marcus and David steadied her and guided her back to the bars. Emily let go of Marcus and David's arms and gripped the bars. Her breathing was heavy, but her eyes shone brighter than ever. "That was amazing," Marcus said, a huge grin spreading across his face. "You did it all by yourself, with our help." He nodded towards David. "She's all yours now, Mr. Marshall." David squeezed Marcus's shoulder in thanks, then turned to Emily. He knelt beside her and gently wiped a small tear from her cheek. "You walked," he said softly. "You really walked." Emily laughed, her voice trembling with joy. "Can't believe it," she whispered. Marcus helped Emily sit down on the low bench beside the bars. He retrieved a small cool pack and placed it gently on her thigh to soothe the tight muscles. Emily leaned forward and pressed her head against the pack. She closed her eyes and let out a long sigh. David sat beside her and wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "I've never been so happy," he said. Emily opened her eyes and looked at her father. "Thank you for believing in me," she said. "And thank you, Marcus, for helping me." She reached out her hand, and Marcus took it. His rough palm felt warm in her soft fingers. They sat there for a few minutes, letting the moment sink in. The sunlight shifted, painting stripes across the floor. The machines in the next room hummed. Quietly, but inside this therapy space, time felt still. After a while, Marcus stood and patted Emily's hand. "Rest now, champ," he said with a playful wink. "Tomorrow, we aim for 4 steps." Emily nodded and smiled. Marcus turned to David. "I'll check her in tomorrow morning," he said. David nodded. "I'll be here," he replied. When Marcus left, David helped Emily into her wheelchair and wheeled her toward the door. Emily looked back at the bars, the silent witnesses to her miracle. She pressed her hand against one of the metal rails and whispered, "Thank you." David pushed the wheelchair slowly down the hall. He stopped outside the window of Emily's room. She steadied herself and looked at him. Her face was peaceful but proud. David lifted his phone and said, "Should I call Mom?" Emily shook her head. "Not yet," she said. "I want to surprise her in person." David smiled and nodded. That evening, Emily lay in her hospital bed, her legs wrapped in light bandages. David sat beside her, reading from a book while she rested. Every so often, she would reach down and touch her legs, as if to confirm that they were still hers. David watched her and thought about how far she had come. A week ago, she could not so much as wiggle her toes. Now she had walked 3 steps. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky pink, Emily closed her eyes. David reached over and turned off the small lamp. He leaned down and kissed her forehead. "Sleep well," he said. "Tomorrow is another adventure." Emily smiled in her sleep and whispered softly, "Thank you." Outside the room, Marcus passed by and noticed the light off in Emily's room. He paused and gently knocked on the door. David opened it and welcomed him inside. Marcus tiptoed to Emily's bedside and watched her rest. He felt a quiet joy spread through him. He had helped her find her legs, but she had found her own courage. David and Marcus exchanged a look of deep respect. No words were needed. They both knew the journey was far from over, but they had reached a milestone that would shape Emily's life forever. Marcus straightened and whispered, "Good night, Emily." He turned to David. "She did great today." David nodded. "She did. She will do even greater tomorrow." He closed the door quietly, leaving the room in peaceful darkness. In the quiet corridor, father and mentor walked side by side. Their footsteps echoed softly. Both carried a warm light within them, a shared belief in Emily's future. And with that belief, they knew there was nothing she could not achieve. Months passed, but each day felt full of promise. Emily's legs grew stronger with every session. She moved from the parallel bars to a walker, and then to crutches. Marcus cheered her on at every turn. David never missed a session. They became a team united by hope and hard work. One bright morning, Emily arrived in the therapy room without her wheelchair. She carried her crutches with confidence. The sun shone through the window, and the bars gleamed in welcome. Marcus stood by the bars, arms open in encouragement. David leaned against the wall, pride shining in his eyes. Marcus guided Emily to stand between the bars. She placed her hands on each side, fingers wrapping around the metal. She paused, breathing deeply. Marcus nodded, and she lifted her right foot, then her left. She shifted her weight onto her crutches, and Marcus gently took the bars away. "Go ahead," he said softly. Emily moved forward, one crutch then the other. Her legs held firm. Each step was careful but steady. David watched, barely breathing. When Emily reached the end of the bars without looking back, she let out a joyful laugh. She turned and shuffled back, her face glowing with triumph. Marcus and David clapped, cheering for her. Tears filled David's eyes, and he hurried forward to hug her. Emily leaned into him, giggling. "I can walk with my crutches now." "Shh!" exclaimed. "That's amazing," Marcus said, smiling. "You did it." Over the next weeks, Emily practiced walking farther each day. She learned to navigate hallways, to climb a few steps on a small staircase, and to stand for longer without help. Marcus introduced balance exercises on a wobble board and gentle leg lifts without support. Emily tackled each challenge the same way she faced her recovery, with determination and a spark of joy in her heart. At home, Emily celebrated her progress with laughter and music. David set up a corner of the living room for her to practice. He cleared space and laid down soft mats. They played her favorite dance songs and counted steps together. Emily moved slowly at first, then faster as her confidence grew. Neighbors who passed by smiled and offered applause. Friends from school sent videos of encouragement. Emily felt surrounded by care and belief. One afternoon, Emily's mother, Claire, flew in from another city. She rushed into the house, breathless with emotion, when she saw Emily standing with her crutches. "My brave girl," she cried, gathering Emily into a tight hug. Tears flowed freely. David joined them, and the three held each other in a moment of pure love. That evening, the family gathered around the kitchen table. Claire brought Emily's favorite meal, and David served plates with careful hands. Emily told them about her latest therapy session. She spoke of stepping down a small ledge and balancing without support. Her voice bubbled with excitement. Marcus had joined them as a surprise guest, and he smiled warmly as Emily recounted every detail. Claire reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Thank you for everything," she said. Months more went by, and Emily prepared for her high school graduation. She chose a flowing dress in soft blue, the same shade as her therapy shirt on the day she first walked between the bars. On graduation day, the family arrived early at the school auditorium. Marcus stood among the guests, wearing a proud grin. Emily leaned on her crutches and walked down the aisle with David on one side and Claire on the other. Each step echoed softly on the auditorium floor. When Emily reached the stage, she paused. Her heart pounded, but she lifted her head high. She spotted Marcus in the front row, nodding encouragement. She spotted her parents' eyes shining with pride. She placed one crutch to the side, planted her feet firmly, and took a single step forward without holding anything. The audience gasped, then burst into applause. Emily smiled, amazed at herself. She continued across the stage, balancing for just those few steps. A school counselor handed her the diploma. She shook hands with the principal, then lifted the diploma above her head. When she returned to her seat, her family enveloped her in hugs. Marcus stood and raised his hand in a proud wave. Emily waved back, tears shining on her cheeks. The plates and cups of graduation reception waited outside, but for a moment time stood still around her. Later that evening they gathered in the backyard. A table held cake and refreshments. Fairy lights twinkled above. Friends, family, and neighbors shared stories of Emily's journey. Each tale brought laughter and tears. Marcus spoke softly. "Emily's strength reminds us all what the human heart can achieve." The crowd cheered. Emily looked at him and hugged him again. "I could not have done it without you," she said. David stood beside her and raised a toast. "To Emily," he said, voice thick with emotion. "You have shown us the power of hope, of hard work, and of love. We celebrate you tonight." Glasses clinked and voices echoed wishes for her future. That night, as the party wound down, Emily and her parents sat by the garden fountain. Water sparkled in the soft lights. Emily rested her crutches against the bench and leaned against her father. "I feel free again," she whispered. David kissed her forehead. "You're free," he said. "You carried yourself back to life with each step." Emily looked at the fountain's dancing water. "I want to help others like Marcus helped me," she said. "I want to become a physical therapist." David nodded, tears in his eyes. "You'll be the best," he said. Weeks later, the hospital offered Marcus a new role, head of a patient mentorship program. He invited Emily and her family to the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Emily, now walking confidently on her own, stood beside him. She spoke to the gathered staff and patients about her journey. She spoke of fear, frustration, and defeat, and of the spark that grew into a flame. She spoke of the man who believed in her and the family who never stopped hoping. When she finished, Marcus took her hand. "You have come full circle," he said. "Now you give others the same gift." Emily smiled, remembering her early days when she could barely wiggle her toes. Now she stood tall, ready to guide someone else toward their first steps. That evening, Emily sat at her desk, writing her college applications. She paused and looked at a photo of her first steps, framed on her desk. The image showed her held by Marcus and David, the bars behind them like silent witnesses. "No." She ran her finger over the glass. She whispered, "Thank you." Then she turned back to her applications, determined to embrace a future shaped by her past. And so Emily's story came full circle, from darkness to light, from fear to triumph, from helplessness to a promise of service. In her heart, she carried the lessons of each step, small or great, that had led her to believe that nothing is impossible when kindness, persistence, and hope walk side by side.